Are you considering a Pokemon card business as a side hustle? If you are, be sure to stick around to see how I made over $1,000 in sales in just 10 days while working my 9-to-5 job. Hey there, Harley here with HD Cards and Collectibles. Hey there, Editing Harley here to tell you that the giveaway winner is in the description down below. Sorry for forgetting to add it to the actual video, so this is the solution. And yes, I'm carrying my mic. It's all I've got. Now back to the video. I decided that 2025 is the year to start my Pokemon card business. And today, I'm going to dive into my very first month in business, January 2025. I'll go over all the big events and decisions I made, all of the major accomplishments I had, any challenges and how I solved them, all of my income and expenses for the month, and finally, what my goals are moving forward. So without further ado, let's get into it. The very first thing I did to get my business started was to file for an LLC. If you haven't heard of LLCs before, it's basically a business structure that separates your personal assets from your business assets. I stayed up super late on New Year's Eve just to sort some cards and file for my LLC as soon as possible. I filed on January 1st, 2025, and it was finalized January 2nd of 2025 because of the holiday. It took a few business days to process everything, and I received all the paperwork and my EIN early the next week. Now you may be wondering, what in the heck is an EIN? An EIN, or Employer Identification Number, is basically just the social security number that's assigned to your business. Once I had all the paperwork, I was able to apply for a business bank account and a business credit card. But I didn't get final approval for everything until the following week, which is when I received the credit card anyways, so that's fine. By this time, it was about halfway through the third week of January already. And once I actually had my credit card in hand, I was able to purchase all of the shipping supplies I needed to get started. I also purchased a UPS mailbox and a state vendor's license. The next major event happened that Saturday, when I applied to be a seller on TCG Player. I applied on January 18th, but it took a couple days to get everything processed, so I didn't end up getting approved till the 21st, which is when I listed my very first card for sale. And I was lucky enough to have my first sale just a couple hours later. I planned to also sell on eBay, but I wanted to give myself a week or so just to feel out TCG Player and get more comfortable before I dove into anything new. And I actually made quite a few sales during this time, but we'll get into those specifics later when we do income and expenses. After weeks of work, I finally posted my very first YouTube video on January 26th, and it was received way better than I expected. Although the first 24 hours did pretty much go how I thought they would. I was getting a couple views here and there, but it didn't even hit double digits yet. But after the 24-hour mark, things really took off and I started getting more and more views. Currently, that video is sitting at almost 1,100 views, which isn't record-breaking by any means, but it was way more support than I expected to receive for my very first video. Now, outside of YouTube, I listed and sold my very first card on eBay on January 30th. I decided that I would sell all of my higher-end singles on eBay, so anything worth about $30 or more is listed there instead of TCG Player. And because the cards I'm selling on eBay are actually worth more, those sales added up pretty quickly. And the last major thing to happen was completely unexpected. I didn't plan to start my own website for quite some time, but because everything was going much better than I thought it would, I decided to pull the trigger. Plus, Wix was running a 50% off sale, so that played a big role in my decision. So now that you know everything that happened, let's go ahead and review the major accomplishments. The first major accomplishment was getting all the accounts set up and getting everything approved so I could actually start selling. The second major accomplishment was having 55 sales on TCG Player and a total of 8 sales on eBay in just 10 days. And number 3 comes in hot with over $1,000 in total sales. And accomplishment number 4 is a twofer. I hit both seller level 2 and 3 in just the first 10 days of selling on TCG Player. Now, if you're not familiar with seller levels on TCG Player, stay tuned for when I release a TCG Player beginner's guide later this week. And I'd say that accomplishment number 5 is getting over 1,000 views on my very first YouTube video. Everything wasn't all sunshines and rainbows the entire month though. There were some challenges I had to face. Admittedly, most of the challenges I've dealt with so far this month weren't anything incredibly severe or super stressful, but there is one challenge in particular that I am very worried about. So let's go ahead and get into those and my solutions. The very first challenge I faced was how long it took to get everything set up. It seemed like anytime I applied for a new account, whether that be for a business bank account or a selling account, it just took way longer than I expected it to. The first 3 weeks of the month was spent just waiting for things to get approved. Now my solution to this was organizing and pricing out cards and planning for YouTube videos and doing other productive things just to keep some sort of forward momentum while waiting. The second challenge actually happened at the time of getting my UPS mailbox. When I went to get the mailbox, they actually weren't able to accept payment at that time for some reason. They gave me the keys and the information for the mailbox, but I wasn't comfortable using it yet because I hadn't paid for it. It took a lot of back and forth to get this solved, and all of that back and forth just ended up causing delays in me actually being able to apply to sell my cards. The solution to this problem ended up just coming in the form of being patient and working with UPS to get everything resolved. The third challenge I ran into was just all the growing pains associated with using a new selling platform for the first time. There were different things that I kept running into that I didn't quite know how to do. I did a bunch of research into both TCG Player and eBay before I ever started selling on there, but it's very much a you don't know until you get into it sort of thing. Luckily, TCG Player and eBay both have knowledge articles and helpful forums that I was able to read to get through whatever issues I had. I would consider my second video to be my fourth challenge. My second video came in like a bucket of cold water. Now, admittedly, it is a far worse video than my first video. I just didn't put in the time and effort into the title, thumbnail, and honestly, the video itself. So it did deserve to flop. But after seeing how well my first video performed, I was a little bit disappointed with how short this second video fell. But the solution to this is obviously just putting in more time and more effort into every video. That includes the title, the thumbnail, the editing, and the filming. This last challenge is the most difficult one of all the challenges. Running my business isn't my only responsibility in this world. First and foremost, I am a husband and a father. My wife and my daughter are my whole world. They are my reason for living when things get rough, and I need to be present for them. Aside from that, I also have a 9-to-5 job that I really do enjoy. I have a fantastic team, so I have a responsibility to them as well. So trying to balance being a husband, father, employee, and business owner has been, and will probably continue to be, a very difficult challenge. And honestly, I don't know if there's a solution for this problem. Even with the best time management strategies, there's only so many hours in a day. For right now, my solution has mainly just been giving up sleep, which I know isn't feasible in the long term, but I'm just making do right now. Just as an aside, I think mental health is very important. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, just be sure to take care of yourself. Obviously, putting your head down and just grinding away is necessary to grow a business in the beginning, but you don't need to run yourself ragged. I myself see a therapist on a regular basis just to keep my mental in check. I also have bipolar disorder, but that's beside the point. And obviously, do whatever you want. Just be kind to yourself. Alright, time to dive into the fun stuff. We're getting into numbers here. I'll be going over all of my income and expenses. First, I'll go over my TCG Player sales, fees, and income. Then I'll go over eBay sales, fees, and income. And then finally, I'll go over total sales and income. Then once we're done with that, we'll review the expenses and the profitability of the business so far. Let's kick things off with TCG Player. From January 21st, which is when I started selling, to January 31st, I had 55 orders for a total of $720.59 in sales. After paying $109.62 in fees, I was left with $610.97 in net sales. And this is of course before I pay taxes on the sales made here in Ohio. And my sales on eBay were a bit surprising, for me at least. I started selling on eBay January 30th, so I only had 2 days of sales in January. And in those 2 days, I had 8 orders for a total of $368.56. After eBay remitted $20.66 in taxes and charged $52.03 in fees, I was left with $295.87 in net sales. After all was said and done, I brought in a total of $1,089.15 in total sales in just 10 days. And after all the fees, I was left with $906.84. But this is before any expenses though, so let's get into that. I went over my startup expenses in my first video, but we'll go ahead and include them here just so we can go over the total profitability of the business as a whole. All of my startup expenses came to a total of $1,067.42. And if you'd like to know what made up those purchases, be sure to go check out my first video. My next major expense was all the postage and shipping charges. I paid a total of $102.55 just to get customers' orders to them. But this is definitely an expense that I'm excited about. It means people are actually buying things. I then had to buy some additional shipping supplies and equipment for $83.04, and I also bought some card savers for $24.66. The card savers are so I can eventually send some cards off to be graded at PSA. The next expense was for Adobe Creative Cloud software, which comes to a total of $42.89, and this will be a recurring monthly expense that I have. But I need the subscription to edit videos, make thumbnails, and product images. And of course, there are free options that I could use instead, but as a graphic designer, I'm very familiar with Adobe products, and in fact, I prefer them. The last expense was very last minute, and maybe a little bit impulsive. I'm selling through my stock of cards much faster than I thought I would, and I'm generating sales that I thought would take quite some time. So soon, I'll be at a point where I have money, but not anything to actually sell. So I'm forced with basically 2 choices. I either need to start buying collections and bulk to resell, or I can start importing Japanese cards sooner than I was planning. So I just moved up the timeline of importing Japanese cards. I also came to this decision because Wix was running that 50% off sale that I mentioned earlier. I paid a total of $657.87. This gave me 3 years of web hosting, 3 years for my domain, and 1 year of a professional email address. With this final expense accounted for, my total spent on the business so far is $1,978.43. As you may have already noticed, this number is bigger than what I've brought in sales, which only means one thing. We're operating at a loss right now. But let's go ahead and run those numbers. We have $906.84 in sales, minus $1,978.43 in expenses, which leaves us at a loss of $1,071.59. Which honestly isn't super awful, all things considered.
But Harley, you're not including the cost of the cards in all of your expenses.
And to that I say, you're right. If I included those costs, I would be operating at an even greater loss, because I have an average of probably about 50 cents into each card I pulled myself, and much more than that for the cards that I purchased from other collectors or from stores. But I plan to do cash basis accounting, so as far as I know, I can't expense out any purchases made before the year I started my business. So in my opinion, there's no point in pinpointing the cost of goods sold for each card if I'm not going to be operating on a cost of goods sold model. Obvious disclaimer, I'm not a CPA and this is not tax advice. And with all of that out of the way, let's move on to my goals going into February. I would like to take this time to thank creators like Brian from Pokémon, Danny Phantom, Rob from RNG Games, CNA Games, Game Vitamins, and Brandon Martin for all of the content they create. Their content is amazing and has been incredibly helpful in helping me get started. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. thank you for taking the precious time out of your day to both watch and support me. As a new content creator and a new business owner, I cannot thank you enough for the support. It really does mean a lot. If you found this video helpful or informative at all, or maybe a little bit entertaining, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you. January was a great start to my business, and I hope to keep the momentum going into February. So my first goal is to reach TCG player seller level 4. I hit seller level 2 and 3 pretty quickly, so I'm hoping that seller level 4 is pretty obtainable. My second goal is to actually purchase some Japanese cards to resell on my website and to launch my website. And I know that making any sales at all will be incredibly difficult starting out, but I hope to use TCG Player and eBay to help bridge the gap while I'm getting things figured out. My third goal is to start a Pokemon card opening channel here on YouTube. That way I'll have an outlet for my collecting and all of my opening. And lastly, I hope to hit 100 subscribers this month on YouTube. So now that you know how I did in my first month of business, be sure to check out this playlist up here to follow me along the journey. I'll catch you guys next time.